Hello, everybody, and welcome to our epic X-Men reread here on Crushing Comics. I am joined by Tyler and Fariha, and we are in the middle of reading Claremont's X-Men from the very start. And today we are going to be reading Uncanny X-Men 118 and 119, as well as some revisions to those issues in Classic X-Men. Just a quick word of warning, we do sometimes talk about future X-Men plots as part of this discussion, so you might become a little bit spoiled, but there is nothing about these two issues that I think is going to cause us to talk about things as recent as House of X and Powers of X. So in that regard, you should be safe in this episode. Before we all get started, last episode we were talking a little bit about other stuff we were doing nerd-wise in recent times. I was also thinking about nerd stuff that I did before I had comics as my main form of nerddom as a kid. The story I always tell is I was really into G.I. Joes as a kid, and each G.I. Joe came with a file card on the back, and they were actually all written by Larry Hama, which is a great detail because he was piloting their whole universe in addition to writing the comic book. But you would have to cut each one of them out from the back of every package. So you wouldn't want to rip the package. You had to open them carefully so you would get the file card. And I had a recipe box with all the file cards, and if I was bored as an 8-year-old, I would just pour out all the file cards on the floor just so I could alphabetize them or have them be Cobra versus G.I. Joes, or do them by what section of the service they're in or whatever. That was my boredom pastime. Then you can see why I was really into having floppy comics and being able to put them all in long boxes and put them in bags and boards and stuff. But does somebody else have a young geek story from their pre-comic book origins?
Fariha?
So I was obsessed with MacGyver.
The TV show at the time.
The original MacGyver.
Original MacGyver. So, and as a kid, and I think I was under 7 or something like that, I was sure that I'm going to marry him. MacGyver, not the actor.
No, actual MacGyver.
No, actual MacGyver. And I remember going in a whole, my mom still tells the story. I don't remember it, but because my mom keeps on saying it, I think I remember it, because apparently there was a whole shouting match with my cousin who tried to tell me that is a fictional character, and then it's not. So I actually had newspaper clipping or posters of everything to do with MacGyver. Most of the time it was just a picture of MacGyver and saying that this episode will be airing this day.
So you're taking clippings from TV Guide, the equivalent of TV Guide, and being this is my man, MacGyver.
Exactly. So recently I actually saw him. He was in an ad, he's doing an ad for something, and then all those love came back. I was oh, it was a really fond memory and stuff and honestly, it's such a shame that I don't actually have those clippings or any of those anymore. I mean, I moved so much cross-continent and stuff. It's just all gone. But part of me really hoped that I still kept them, because that would have been a really cool memory.
Wow.
Definitely.
That's so funny. Do you think it was just because he was so inventive? It appealed to your tiny engineer brain at the time?
Possibly, because I was also into A-Team. The original A-Team, I was really into them as well. I don't think I was into the Magnum PI or any of that, but I was really into A-Team, and so apparently I used to have my mom had a lot of chains and stuff, and I used to wear them all and
to
walk
be
around
Mr. T.
Mr. T. Yeah, walk around like Mr. T, and I was really trying to convince my mom to allow me to have the mohawk, which never passed, but. Yeah, so the thing is it was MacGyver, and then it moved on to A-Team. So yeah, it just kind of worked.
Well, maybe this is why you love Sunspot so much, because Sunspot is canonically in love with Magnum PI, not the actor, but the character.
Oh,
it's a big ongoing joke in Claremont that he's obsessed with Magnum PI.
Okay,
he's the paragon of virtue. See, I said no spoilers for current X-Men comics, but here's a big New Mutant spoiler.
No, but that's what I'm saying. I mean, it's it's a therapy session now. Now I'm seeing, connecting my past with my present and everything. Whoa, this blew my mind. Whoa.
Wow. Tyler, do you have anything that can match being in love with MacGyver? I don't know.
Not really. I think I think my story would be so boring, because it is what? this again? And this is a strange thing. When I started reading comics, I started reading my uncle's collection. And at that time, I was reading a lot, I mean a lot for me, of fantasy novels. And one of
Mm.
the one that I really remember reading, or well, I remember it clearly because it is the very first one that I've read, and that is Dragonlance. And it is also at that time that I started playing D&D. So it's kind of like, oh wait, I have not grown at all. It's like the current me is the same as that me, like, 30 years ago. So I don't know.
So it's funny you say that, to bring it back together, and then we'll move on to the X-Men issue. So I didn't know where to get my hair cut when I first got to New Zealand. Now, of course, I'm just not. But I found a barber that seemed cool, and I went and I sat in his chair and we were talking. He had a kid around my kid's age, and I looked up, and all around the top molding above his mirror were all these classic GI Joes. And he was like, "Oh yeah, I used to really love them, so I made it my mission as an adult to rebuy all of them one wave at a time." And in my brain, I was like, I could do that. I could have that. I was like, no, Peter, stop. You already have comic books. You don't need to, and the prestigious Blazer collection. You do not need to also collect GI Joes. But it was just funny how in my head I so easily went to yes, we could finally have all of the Wave 1 GI Joes.
Yeah.
All right.
But your GI Joe story makes so much sense now, because you are like, the GI Joe is in the next level. I'm like, why Peter likes GI Joe? It's in such a different
No, but
thing
that's the
for
thing.
you.
The last year's run of GI Joe is something you can love, even not caring at all about GI Joes. If anything, I've avoided reading GI Joe comics, because whenever I do, I'm like, this is just trying to adultify this thing that I loved as a kid, when I just think it can be a kid version. But this one, the past year, has actually just been such a different version of it that I don't have that reaction, because I started reading the 2008 IDW GI Joes, and it was just cruel to the characters, and I was like, I don't want to see these characters killed viciously, which, even though the one last year kind of did, it just didn't have the same feeling to me. I don't know. So that's a conversation for a different time. Now, let's dig into these two X-Men issues. This is an arc, it goes together, so you might find that we talk about some things from one issue into the next. Uncanny X-Men 118 and 119. The X-Men arrive on this ship with its Japanese crew to find that Japan is under siege. There's earthquakes, there's a firestorm, and they're trying to figure out what's happening. And it turns out, we learn over the course of these issues, that Japan's being held hostage by Moses Magnum, who's this minor villain that's been in a couple of other series. But a lot of other things happen here, which makes these issues interesting, other than just being this somewhat throwaway arc of them fighting Moses Magnum. So let's always, as we do, start with Fariha. This was your first time reading these two issues. Did anything really stick out for you as something to love in Uncanny X-Men 118 and 119?
The first thing I want to say, though, I've been to Tokyo. You cannot see Mount Fuji from Tokyo.
Yes. I know what you mean.
So I don't know whether this is supposed to be Tokyo or this is supposed to be another city, but Tokyo kind of looks like that. So I was like, okay, come on, guys. We don't have to put Mount Fuji to say that it's Japan. You already said it's Japan. So yeah, I think we're I'm kind of beginning to feel like nobody wants to let anyone else know that they're still around, and they're just gonna jet set around the world. And this is X-Men International Tour. So we're kind of in between, middle of that. I loved a couple of bitch slap that Cyclops got, one from Storm and one from Wolverine. And then also Wolverine getting cozy with his with Mariko over here. So there's a lot more we're finding out about Wolverine that we talked about before, that he's becoming a more a character with more history, or things that he doesn't necessarily talked about, but we're finding about more about that. And in around all of that, I think for the first time, X-Men is kind of in the middle of an international situation, which, we haven't seen them before. But, that's something, obviously, as X-Men history grows, it will become a thing. So there was a lot of that. And I think it was kind of like a fairly similar contrast with the space issue, but this time in Earth and in Japan. So,
What
And
about
I'm
you,
glad
Ty?
that Sunfire is not the main, in the main roster. Like,
Yeah, but he's
okay.
back. He quit so many
I know.
times and he's back.
I know he's back, but I'm glad. I'm like, there's a reason why you're not in the main roster.
Yeah.
He's just another flying person. He's attitudinal like Wolverine. He has no real place. Yeah. Tyler, what about you? What sticks out to you when you reread these issues?
Oh, I remember a couple of episodes before we were talking about Peter, the Salvage Land issue. I think Peter was talking about this splash page, which looks like a pin-up, and he's like he loves that page. And I said something like, my favorite one is not that one, and it comes like a couple of issues later, and it actually happens in this issue. It is the whole Japan is burning thing.
Oh, it's a beautiful page.
Yeah, I love that page, and I also love the fact that only Nightcrawler is in costume. The rest of them are like in this green jumpers and stuff like that. And Wolverine, of course, he's like, he has to show off his hairy arms and stuff like that. But I thought it was, I don't know why, but this page always stuck out in my mind, and I always remember this page. I think it could be because when I first started reading X-Men, they don't happen in Asia often. So this is only one of the few times that it happens in Asia. And of course, when it happens in Asia, it's always Japan, or later on Madripoor. But and I think there was one issue where there's one character from Singapore, but they didn't draw Singapore properly. So yeah, but that happens quite far later. Yeah, but that's the thing. And I really enjoy part of the stories, but not so much the plot of the story, but more like the characters' development in these two issues.
And I also want to say that too, like you're saying that how much you love this splash page. As soon as I see it, because of the coloring, I can instantly say that something is not right. That something is going down. I don't need to read any of the bubbles. I can just by it being red, I can be like, yeah, oh my God, something is not right. Nowadays, they would have probably colored it blue and then with some smoke.
Here also would be like gray clouds, and they're like, oh, there's smoke. Yeah. Whereas this is just so much more fantastical. Anytime there's pink, I'm into it. I don't care if it's canonical that Colossus would be pink when they heat him up, or the clouds would be pink if there's fire. If there's pink on the comic page, I'm into it. So the port city they're arriving in technically is Agarashima, which does not seem to be a real world place based on some tentative Googling here. It seems to be an X-Men invention. So it's not quite Tokyo, although it clearly is meant to maybe evoke Tokyo. It's just one of these invented Marvel comic book places, I think. And so they arrive and they find, again, much like the Savage Land, interesting theme here that connects them, that they're arriving to ecological disasters caused by bad actors, right? And that it's almost establishing the X-Men aren't just here to beat up villains. They're here to care about the kind of ecological happenings in a world. Like they were going to leave the Savage Land in that last arc, right? They're like, oh, there's an evil god, Garak, and the X-Men are like, peace out, y'all. But then when it's blizzarding, they're like, okay, I guess we're going to have to fix something. And similarly here, they're just like, look, we just want to phone home. And then it's like, oh no, there's earthquakes that are unnatural and firestorms. And the X-Men are like, we have to get involved. Now, Claremont doesn't stay on this theme really long, but I do think it's an interesting area that he's trying to carve out at this time, knowing that he's competing at Marvel against the Fantastic Four and the Avengers, who are both relatively popular at this point, who are very, Fantastic Four is very sciencey, Avengers is very beat up the mad villain, and he's kind of carving out his own reason for X-Men to get involved in things before they just get involved in things just for being mutants, which is what eventually will be the case.
No,
that's
definitely
fair.
Yeah. The thing also is that I think is the title is starting to get popular around at this time, right? And I think he's trying to carve out a niche, and as it gets popular, and then maybe when it gets really popular, he's like, okay, I don't have to do this anymore. So it goes back to like the more modern type of X-Men. Well, as it develops, it becomes a little bit closer to modern pre-Hogspots type of stories that we are very used to.
So is it also like back in that day time. I mean, like a lot more environmental consciousness, like those kind of things that, what you're doing to the world around you. Is there any kind of like, not necessarily hidden message, but, subliminal message around that as well?
Certainly
I
in
don't
the
know, what
70s,
was
it's
the-
topical, but I just think it's
Yeah.
interesting because he went back to that well, like right away again, where the X-Men are just they're really willing to step away, except ecological disaster.
Yeah. And he also established a little bit of a timeline, right? They were 6 weeks in the open sea, and they spent about 2 to 3 weeks in Savage Land. So that means they is slightly more than 2 months after they were presumed dead. And you kind of have to wonder, why didn't Storm just fly off to some other country and like use the phone there or something?
Well, she was keeping them alive at sea, right?
That's
So many
true.
typhoons were assaulting their boat. But Claremont uses that time gap to do an interesting, maybe annoying thing here. Is he decides that we don't have enough new characters. It's not enough to have Sunfire. It's not enough to introduce Mariko. We're also going to have Misty Knight and Colleen Wing here, who he recently had to give up when his Iron Fist run with Byrne was canceled. And what complicates this further is they're friends with Jean. And Jean, as we didn't really cover this in the last episode, but Jean had just seen Misty at an airport as she went off on this vacation at some point when the X-Men had only been dead for, I guess, 6 weeks. And she's like, well, I've got to move on with my grief. So there's this whole kind of comedy of error happening where like Misty knows Jean is alive. And now Misty's finding out the X-Men are alive. But like, there's like a game of telephone going on where there's one missed detail here.
This would never happen in real life.
No.
Because this would never happen in real life. So it's one of those like a movie moment, like, because we were like, she's like, yeah, like, give my regards to Scott. And then in real life, Jean would fall apart right there. And like, oh, Scott is dead. But,
Yeah, but if Jean fall apart, you are going to break her apart. You'll be like, oh, she's so weak. Oh, she's just crying over a man.
No, that's not, it's not the same. It's not the same though, because that's a justifiable grief, right? But the thing is like the ones that we were talking about is like, he's okay, like, oh my God, Scott needs that. No, he's okay. Calm down. Like, so, no, but the thing is, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's just like comedy of like, it's like, oh, now everyone knows. But I thought that it was from storytelling point of view, it's kind of fun because it's like, oh, this one character knows something, but the rest of them don't know. And then the information is just there, but we're not talking about it. So, it's fine. But what I was going to ask though, why is Storm so sassy against Cyclops? Because over here, like Cyclops, like she's like, Nightcrawler is waiting, signaling all clear. Are you sure, Storm? If I weren't, I would have kept silent. I was like, okay, maybe because it's the constant trying to keep the typhoon away and everything is just getting to her, because I was like, whoa, that's not Storm I know.
I mean, I mean, Storm will be more like, I think Storm is like, there is a silent duh at the end, because it's like, why would I say this if I'm not sure? Like, duh. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't think it is not like not. I think it is Storm being confident and like, these simple things, don't question me. It's basically that. It's basically that, it's like, oh yeah, if I tell you I read this, I read it. Don't question me. Like, why are you asking me again?
Right.
It kind of hits me just a little bit differently, which is that Claremont's trying to show that Storm is like unsentimental. Not that she's not emotional, but like she's not going to be like, oh, maybe our friends are signaling for help. She's like, no nonsense, Yeah, that's what I said is kind of the message. And I think it's him kind of zeroing in that Storm is not. There's very little superfluous about her. And in a similar way to Wolverine, she like when he's like, you didn't ask about him talking to animals or speaking Japanese or any of these things.
Yeah.
This is kind of Storm's version of why did you ask? Like I'm telling you the right amount of information. You don't need to do a follow-up. And so it's almost like two sides of the coin that we're starting to see, that Wolverine and Storm are kind of the sterner members, each in their own way, because Storm, of course, is much nicer than Wolverine. But that's how I always read it. It's that Claremont's kind of establishing these are the two people people who don't have extraneous things to say.
And this is the first time I think we established Wolverine could read Japanese.
Right.
You didn't
So
ask.
his Japanese like Japanese roots start to come together right over here. So question to that is, do people know that he's immortal? Like, I mean, he cannot die. Do people know that yet?
No,
Not
I mean, we're
yet.
really early in them even knowing he has a
Yeah.
healing factor.
Oh, okay. So there's the
Well,
but the thing
it
is
was
to other
mentioned. It was mentioned just briefly the issue before where the dinosaurs bite his hand, that he said something like, "Oh, I heal really fast." That's
It's
the whole
vague.
event.
So
Yeah,
there's
it's
no
vague.
idea that he like lives forever and he can't die. I mean, we're really early in this stuff. But one of the classic X-Men revisions to these two issues is he refers to the time he was in Japan before in the actual issues. The classic X-Men revises that to one of the times he's been in Japan before. So Claremont at this point didn't fully have it plotted out, even though he knew he had this time that he had been in Japan. And then, by the mid 80s, Claremont had this whole, he's been around for a long time, as Sabretooth, his father, all of this other stuff.
No, but the thing is, like, he was also saying that you didn't ask. But the thing is, who asked someone, hey, do you speak Japanese? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a little unfair. I'm like, okay, I mean,
Well, it's kind of funny considering that Sunspot was like on the team before and it just like never came up that Wolverine, Sunfire. It never came up that Wolverine could have been speaking Japanese to him. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, Fariha, do you speak Mandarin?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, if I suddenly start showing things like, oh, we didn't know that, you never asked before. It's like, the same way, the one time Tyler just busted onto us that how he was in the army. Yeah, but why would we even ask Tyler? Tyler, were you ever in the army?
Well, theoretically, on a superhero team, you would think, now we're getting into the kind of nerd stuff that I personally try to avoid, of like trying to impose the real world in the comic book, but it's fun sometimes. You would think that if you had a new X-Men, there would be like an intake form of like, let's figure out what your useful skills are. Like, do you speak any other languages? What weapons are you proficient with? Are there any militias around the world who are hoping for your death?
Yeah.
Like, fill us in on a couple of these things. Just, I mean, if you were starting a superhero team and recruiting, wouldn't you have some kind of intake questionnaire survey?
Give each of them a D&D character sheet where they fill in language spoken and skills.
Maybe this will trigger it. I mean, now definitely Avengers should definitely do it. But for X-Men, they're kind of like take all mutants.
Yeah, it's a little bit more laissez-faire in X-Men than Avengers.
Right.
You don't get a card
Anyway,
if you're doing the Avengers.
Yeah, I was just kind of like, okay, like, whoa, dude. Like, you didn't ask me. Yeah, because that's a weird question to ask. Weirdly specific, but yeah.
Well, there's one. Oh, go ahead, Tyler.
No, I was just going to say that the other thing is that like Nightcrawler's power is like greatly expanded here. Like he could like one jump from the ship to the dock, like and he himself mentioned that, oh, I'm not even tired or anything.
Ooh.
Yeah, because Claremont is realizing that just like combat range teleportation is just not actually all that interesting to write about. So there's a really big sequence here that intercuts two important things. One ultimately more important than the other. Wolverine meets Mariko, who goes on to be one of the main great loves of Wolverine's life. And I always think it's easy to almost ascribe that he knew her before in some way because it just is so epic, but like, no, it's all part of Claremont. And then the other thing is, as he's, meeting and instinctively protecting Mariko, there's this huge siege of these armored mandroids on the compound where they're staying, and the team has to briefly fight them and fights them in a really visually satisfying way and it's nice because the X-Men hasn't really had to deal with that much fodder up to this point. They're always fighting the main villain or like the people who's going to kidnap them or something. So we don't get to see them do anything very successfully. And that is one of the themes where we keep coming back to why can't they work together? Because Claremont hasn't had them fight anything where it makes sense for them to win the fight, quite honestly. So it's kind of really satisfying that we see that little bit of tenderness from Wolverine at first, and then it's intercut with the team actually being competent. I mean, you get this great thing of them trying to hit Colossus with a truck, and Colossus just reaching up from underneath and flipping the whole, stopping the truck or flipping the whole truck over. I just think it's really a fun, satisfying sequence. I don't know. What did you think about this big action sequence here, you two?
I loved that Colossus thing. Like I loved, because I really love it when superheroes, like, even despite having all this superpower, but is smart about how they use it.
Mm-hmm.
The same way, how Nightcrawler took Magneto's head off,
Helmet.
not helmet off. So it's it's kind of like, I think like I really like this moment where it's like a lot of fighting things going on, and it is a lot of sensory or information overload. But when you kind of stop to kind of look at it, it's like everyone is kind of fighting individually and cleverly.
Yeah, I mean the fact that Colossus get knocked out of the way twice in this arc is going to come back to play at a later stage very fast. But yeah, I mean I mean they are fighting better, they are fighting smarter, and in some ways they are working together on the fly. Well, in this issue on the fly, in the next issue plan. So I thought this is this was really well done.
Well, let's roll into that next issue. Now the enemy has exposed himself. Moses Magnum, he's holding all of Japan hostages. The X-Men want to do something about it, and so they have to break into his volcano island base. It's just such a trope. It makes me think of The Incredibles, where there's the volcano base, because it's like everybody gets a volcano base. Magneto's in a volcano base, then Garak was in a volcano base, then the beast people that Nightcrawler fought and the backup were in a volcano base. Everybody gets a volcano base. So he's got a volcano base on it. I mean, it works because they're a volcanic island atolls or whatever on the outskirts of Japan. But the team has to figure out how to break in, and they can't just use pure force with a frontal assault, because he will just detonate Japan, if that's the case. So they have to decide, how are they going to get in? And what's interesting about this issue is that it's pretty much a full issue tactical invasion, and you can almost contrast it with what the X-Men went through in issues 94 and 95, where they have to invade the Norad mountain to get to Count Nefaria, and they just fail repeatedly at it. Here is Claremont showing us that the team has grown and has changed, and that they can attack on three fronts, right? We have Nightcrawler kind of stealthily attacking, we have Storm and Banshee, baffling the radars and things, and then we have the more physical members of the team tunneling in to base. So Fariha, what did you think about this one?
Banshee gets to shine a little bit better than everyone else, because I feel like the pattern is coming to emerge, that every story there's like one person that's like kind of
the star
or the star of it. So finally it was Banshee's turn. So, but and it's very interesting though, because we talked about it before, where it's like something happens and then the X-Men just kind of goes into it, and they're like, oh, we couldn't deal with it, and then they plan and then they come back. But we are seeing the difference that last time it kind of worked, even when they were head first went to it, they were a little bit more more tactical and more interesting in their fight style. Now they have planned it, and it's better than what we have seen before planned fights. So it's like they're getting better and better. And then I think, whether it's in this one or someone else said that they actually were been practicing the whole 6 weeks they were in the ship.
Yeah, so they're just on the deck of the ship, like
yeah,
and then I'm pretty sure
the edition, the classic edition, that
the
epilogue.
Yeah.
Last in 117, so that would be classic X-Men 23, where they have another epilogue of one page of the X-Men.
Okay, but so the thing is, it kind of also makes sense, and I'm pretty sure all the ship people were probably like, the hell, like, what are they doing? Doofy, like nerds. But yeah, so I think from all of that point of view, it was kind of forgettable. But if you kind of look into the progression of the story or all the things that's happening, it's kind of like a good addition.
Yeah.
The thing that always makes me think is that their powers have secondary effects. I think very much till now it's been treated as very what can we do to shoot this power directly at the bad guy? But this is a time that Banshee is like, I actually can cut off his means of communication to everybody. You know, it goes to Storm, we're going to see shortly, is going to start using fog to obfuscate things. Like instead of just going lightning bolt, flood, flood. And so it's just really interesting. It's the same thing with you and Nightcrawler with the Magneto's helmet. Like sometimes the most interesting thing they can do with their power is not punch somebody. And I think that, you know, this is a time that we saw Banshee really realize he doesn't always just have to fly around and scream at people, that his power is actually useful in a completely different way. And it almost kills him to do it because he's, you know, he's the incompetent red shirt of the X-Men, and he can't ever be effective without pretty much dying.
But it was very sad though. Like towards the epilogue, it's like, oh, they were not here. I got discharged. But then, you know, then it turned out they were all waiting for him at the home. So, you know, it was nice. But the thing is, like, we also saw, I think it was in the previous one, that why they can't communicate with Professor X, because Professor X kind of went, so long, people, and then left Earth, you know.
Yeah, he's so responsible that he's like, I better turn off all the phone numbers to the mansion. We don't want to be draining the Xavier coffers with paying that monthly local phone bill, you know.
Exactly. And then this would have been an international call back in the day. That would have been
and what if they called collect?
Money,
That would have been a lot of money.
Yeah.
Oh, oof. Like, you know.
Well, I mean, Sunfire is rich, so that's fine.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, you know, I mean, I was just kind of like thinking of that, you know, in context with what we talked about before, that what Moira thinks about this. I'm like, oh, he's slowing down even more. Like, you know, had some idea that's like, and then it's like, I was like, whoa, that's not good. But yeah.
So there's two other small elements here, maybe three. So one is that Wolverine, after this is all resolved and they're having their kind of goodbye party, really wants to go and speak to Mariko alone.
Yeah.
Which is funny because Claremont has just been inserting a bunch of him pining for Jean. Like, but this is also the beginning of his fascination with Mariko, which to me, I think just extends my dislike of Wolverine. Like, of course, you want to face both of them, right? So there's that. There's Jean, who's now been through her holiday vacation, which we'll get to in the classic issue that we're not talking about this. And then she's visiting Muir Island because at least she can see people that she knows, like Lorna and Alex there.
Yeah.
And then we also get this really nice moment of Storm telling Nightcrawler that she loves him very much in a very sisterly kind of way, and you get the sense that she says a similar thing to Colossus. Again, as Claremont is trying to make clear she's no nonsense and she's nobody's side piece Smurfette girlfriend. She's the main character of this run. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right. But the thing is, like, even though Storm is saying it as a sisterly way, if you look at Nightcrawler.
Oh yeah, he's not taking it in a brotherly way. No.
Yeah, he's thinking something different. You know, see, I'm not noticing backgrounds.
His face there. I mean, it's terrifying. The face he's making there is absolutely terrifying. I can't. It's like.
Like, hold on. But yeah, so but the thing is, even though she moves on from it, and to be honest though, it was a little bit too close because I was like, hey, whoa, what's going on, you know? But
he's still like gripping his cheek.
Yeah, like, you know, and I'm like, Nightcrawler's getting some ideas. First he saved that girl. Now he's like all about like it is a store. But yeah, so at the ending. What about that? The last page.
Wow.
I'm excited about
What did you think about that? What's happening? What's going on?
What happened to that awful Angus?
I may know what happened, so I'm not gonna say it, but it's
Take a guess.
character that's there, right?
We won't tell you. Just guess. We won't tell you if it's right or wrong.
Okay. Is it Proteus?
I just think it's important that the guy who is racist to the X-Men about renting a boat gets taken out. I think that's that's what's important here. We really need to appreciate his name is Angus McWhorter, and he once rented the X-Men a hovercraft. And one of the most important captions in the history of
that's
X-Men.
the most important caption.
Yeah, no, I mean that's the thing. It's a Moira Island Christmas Day. A life ends and a nightmare is born. So
the question also is like to just basically, take in the fact that do you think there's a reason why Moira wanted Jean to be there?
Well, we promised no House of X spoilers in this episode, so unfortunately we'll have to save that for some other time.
I don't know about that.
We told them very safe. Yeah. And also, why would Xavier want to go to space at this point? Another wonderful question.
And like how fast can you so now I understand how you can always gain Wolverine's trust. Just be, a girl that he's
be a lady and turn your back to him one time.
Yeah,
and then he
because immediately after meeting Mariko, he was gonna tell her his real name, which at this point I think none of the X-Men know, except the leprechauns.
Didn't get that questionnaire signed. Write your name. Logan Canadian. But yeah, I was like so close. But he also kind of says like, "Oh, I'm not American."
It's like I'm not American.
I'm like, yeah, Canada pride.
There are only a few revisions to this issue in Classic X-Men. It gives a very slightly different spin on Moses Magnum's powers, which really ultimately doesn't matter too much. Yeah. And also gives an extra scene in the hospital at the end as they all welcome Banshee, from his convalescence, hinting at this flirtation between Scott and Colleen. And this is really, people get really hung up on this because how to even say this? Like, he thinks Jean is dead for 6 weeks. Jean thinks he's dead for 6 weeks. And they're just moving on. Everybody's moving on.
And also the fact that Colleen basically dressed up and put on makeup just to go meet. Well, question. Colleen knows that Jean is not dead, right?
Theoretically. Because Misty just saw her alive. You would have thought on their travels to Japan, Misty would have been like, "Oh, I just ran into my roommate Jean. She's going on vacation."
No, but hold on. She actually knows, because there was a thing over here where it's like, "Oh, that's Scott. Oh, it's so sad that he's not single." So she definitely knows.
So what
she's just not going to say anything.
Yeah,
I don't like it. I don't like it one bit.
It's 70s. Everyone's horny, and
so that part is. That part is like pushed out. It's not canon now.
Yeah, it's not canon now. This is why I've never liked Cyclops and Wolverine. People are like, "You sure do hold a grudge." I'm like, that's because they're both written as dirtbags from the very beginning of their comic book lifetimes. So look,
I do like Sasclops though, but we'll get to it at some point.
So look, there are Classic X-Men issues that go along with this. We've mentioned the revisions on Classic X-Men 24 and 25. The story in 25 explicitly takes place a little bit later, so we'll tackle it in an upcoming episode. But the real interesting thing here about this is Classic-ish X-Men 24. We're not going to talk about this story. It does fit in here. Jean was briefly on a vacation, which happens off panel in the original issues. She even mentions that she just had a little her time. And this shows the vacation, but in such a way that is so explicit in how it connects to the Dark Phoenix saga that to read it now and to have that foreknowledge for 12 issues just doesn't make any sense. And I'm usually the one who's like, read the things where they work in continuity.
Correct.
But this particular story, I think, just wrecks your reading of Jean for the next year. It just messes everything up. So Tyler and I spoke about it, and we agreed that you shouldn't read it now.
Yeah, you shouldn't read it now.
And I followed their advice.
Okay. So we're going to be talking about it soon enough, but not now.
Not now.
Very soon.
Well, the X-Men are going to continue their world tour as they try to get back to America. And in the next episode, we are going to be talking about Uncanny X-Men 120 and 121. And we're going to be talking about Classic X-Men backup stories from issues 25 and 26. So I hope you're going to continue your Epic X-Men reread with us, even as some of these stories are a little bit marginal. It's fun to talk about them with friends because you get to pull out all of these other details, which is just one more reason that what, Fariha?
X-Men is better when it's read together.
That's right. And so I'm so happy I get to do this, my third or fourth or fifth reread of these issues, along with Tyler and Fariha, and along with all of you. So thank you so much for listening to another episode of our classic X-Men epic reread. And we'll be back next time for some Chaos in Canada, where we meet a little bit more of Alpha Flight. So that will be fun. Until then, we hope that you are well.
Bye.